English translation by ㅤㅤㅤㅤ. Read by Luna Minerva. Chapter 37. Flora, Part 6. Lan Wangji's entire body was shrouded in a powerful, icy aura. He stood in front of Wei Ying, protecting him. Xue Yang cast out Xuanhua to parry Lan Wangji's strike. The two famed swords clashed head-on, then flew back to their wielders' respective hands. "Isn't this referred to as arriving early isn't as good as arriving just on time?" Wei Ying said. Lan Wangji replied. Finished speaking, he continued crossing swords with Xue Yang. Earlier, Wei Ying had been the one chased back and forth by Xue Yang, but now Xue Yang was forced to retreat again and again by Lan Wangji. Seeing that the circumstances were boding ill for him, his eyes flicked around, and he put on a slight grin, abruptly tossing Xuanhua from his right hand to his left. His right hand reached into his sleeves and shook around. On high alert, Wei Ying thought the youth was preparing to fling some kind of concealed poison or weapon, only to see him pull out another sword and seamlessly start attacking with both weapons. The sword that Xue Yang had drawn radiated a dark, gloomy light. When he swung it, it appeared to let off wisps of black energy, contrasting sharply with the pure, silver light of Xuanhua. Xue Yang wielded both swords with the fluidity of moving clouds and flowing water, his left and right hand coordinating perfectly. Immediately, he gained the upper hand. "Jiang Zai?" Lan Wangji asked. "Oh, Han Guangjun recognizes this sword. What an honor," Xue Yang said. Jiang Zai was Xue Yang's own sword. The sword's name, like its owner, carried the specter of bloody slaughter. "The name truly suits you perfectly," Wei Ying interjected. "Step back. Your presence is not needed here," Lan Wangji said. Humbly listening to his opinion, Wei Ying retreated. He backed up to the door, glanced outside, and saw Wei Ying clutching Song Lan by the neck, holding him in mid-air, his face an expressionless mask. He slammed the other fierce corpse against the wall, producing a large, human-shaped dent. In return, the also expressionless Song Lan grabbed Wei Ying's wrist and, with a flip, threw him into the ground. Without a hint of a grimace, the two corpses smashed and pounded each other. The noise of the blows echoed loudly and ceaselessly. Neither could feel pain or feared injury. Unless they were cut into pieces, they could continue to fight, even if their limbs were snapped. "It seems like I'm not needed here either," Wei Ying said to himself. Suddenly, he saw Lan Jingyi waving at him frantically from inside a pitch-black store across the street. "I'm definitely needed over there." Right as he stepped forward, Bi Chen shined magnificently. In the space of a second, Xue Yang's hand slipped, and Xuanhua flew from his grip. Lan Wangji took advantage of the opening and caught it. When Xue Yang saw that Xuanhua had fallen into someone else's hands, he swung Jiang Zai directly at Lan Wangji's left arm, which wielded the sword. The attack missed, and a cold black rage flashed in Xue Yang's eyes. "Give this sword to me," he said darkly. "The sword does not suit you," Lan Wangji said. Xue Yang let out an icy laugh. Wei Wuxian walked over to the disciples who surrounded him. "Everyone's fine, right?" he asked. "No problems. We listened to you and held our breaths." "As long as none of you have problems, that's good. If anyone doesn't listen to me, I'll make them eat the congee again." Each of the youths who had tasted the concoction pretended to vomit. Just then, the sound of footsteps came from every direction. Human-shaped silhouettes had already started appearing at the end of the street in unending numbers. Lan Wangji also heard the sound. He waved his arm and pulled out his Xue Yang from his sleeve. He threw the instrument onto the table and tossed Piqin from his right to his left hand. Ferocity undiminished, he continued to battle Xue Yang. At the same time, without looking back, he raised his hand and strummed down the strings. The twang of the Qin traveled all the way to the end of the street, and the familiar, unsettling sound of the corpse's skulls bursting answered. Lan Wangji continued fighting Xue Yang with one hand and playing the guojin with the other, his gaze skimming over the scene and his fingers strumming absent-mindedly. Though both his hands were occupied, his bearing was still serene. "Amazing!" Jinling blurted out. He had seen Jiang Zheng and Qin Guanyao in action during Naitan's beheading monsters, and thought his uncles were the two most powerful cultivators in the world. He had always feared Lan Wangji more than he respected him, and only due to his silencing spell and cold demeanor. But now he couldn't help but admire the man's elegant skill. "Of course Lan Wangji is amazing," Lan Jingyi said proudly. "He just never likes to show off. He's very low-key, right?" The right was directed at Wei Wuxian. Baffled, he replied, "Are you asking me? Why?" "Don't tell me you don't think Lan Wangji is amazing," Lan Jingyi said anxiously. Wei Wuxian rubbed his chin. "He's amazing, of course. Very amazing. He's the most amazing of all." As he spoke, he couldn't help but smile. The disturbing, soul-shaking night of peril was finally coming to a close, and it was nearly daybreak. However, this was hardly good news. The arrival of daylight meant that the mystical fog would thicken once more. Then, even walking a single step would bring difficulties. If Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji were by themselves, it wouldn't be too much of a problem. But there were still so many other living people. If they were surrounded by walking corpses, they would struggle to escape even if they grew wings. Just as thoughts about countermeasures were whirling about Wei Wuxian's head, the clear, crisp tap of the bamboo pole sounded again. The ghost of the blind, tongueless girl had returned. Wei Wuxian made a snap decision. "Let's go." "Go where?" Lan Jingyi said. "Follow the sound of the bamboo pole," Wei Wuxian replied. "You want us to follow a ghost?" Jinling said, somewhat startled. "Who knows where she'll take us?" "Yes, exactly. Follow her. The sound's been tailing you ever since you got here, right? You tried to walk further into the city, but she was leading you toward the city gates, and then you ran into us. She was trying to drive you away, to rescue you." The strange tapping noise, which was suddenly close, suddenly far, was her method of scaring the living who entered the city. But though she was trying to frighten, her intentions were not necessarily bad. It was possible that she had also thrown the paper shadow guard head Wei Wuxian had kicked into his path in order to alert and scare him. "Plus, she was obviously trying to tell us something urgent last night," he said. Only she wasn't able to express what it was. But once Xue Yang came, she immediately disappeared. There's a 4 in 5 chance that she was trying to hide from him. In other words, She definitely isn't on his side. Xue Yang? Why is Xue Yang here now? Weren't those two Xiao Xingchen and Song Lan? I'll explain later. Basically, the person fighting Han Guangqun inside the store isn't Xiao Xingchen, but Xue Yang posing as Xiao Xingchen. The bamboo pole continued tapping the ground, as though waiting and urging them to hurry up. If they followed the ghost, it was possible they would fall into some trap, but if they didn't, they would be surrounded by poison-spraying corpses, which wasn't any safer. The crowd of youngsters decisively chose to join Wei Wuxian and run after the noise. Sure enough, when they started moving, the sound started moving too. Where the fog was thin, they could even catch glimpses of a hazy petite silhouette ahead of them, though other times they saw nothing. After dashing after her and following her for a while, Lan Wangji said, "Are we just going to keep running like this?" Wei Wuxian turned and shouted, "Han Guangqun, I leave Xue Yang up to you. We're gonna go a few steps onward." A note rang from the chin strings, which sounded like someone saying, Wei Wuxian let out a puff of laughter. "You aren't gonna say anything else," Lan Wangji said. "What else do you want? What else should I say?" "Why not? I'm worried about you. I'm staying." "Go! No, I'm not going. If I go, you have to come with me." That's the kind of conversation you should have. Wei Wuxian did a spit take. "Who taught you that? Who told you people should talk to each other that way? Never mind me. Can you imagine your Han Guangqun saying something like that?" "No," each of the Lan clan's juniors said. "Right? It's a waste of time. I'm sure someone as dependable as your Han Guangqun will be able to handle the situation. I'll focus on my own thing, and we'll just wait for him to find me, or I'll find him." They followed the sound of the bamboo pole for a few minutes, turning around several times in the process. Suddenly, the noise came to an abrupt stop before them. Wei Wuxian stretched out his hand and stopped the youths behind him, then walked forward a few steps. A solitary house stood amidst the ever-thickening gloom. Someone pushed open the door and waited silently for the crowd of strangers to enter. Wei Wuxian felt that there had to be something inside. Not some dangerous, murderous thing either, but something that would tell them a few things. Something that would partly unravel the mystery. "Come, everyone, let's go inside," he said. He lifted his foot and stepped into the house. Without glancing back, he issued a reminder to the juniors as he adjusted to the darkness. "Mind the threshold. Don't trip." One of the juniors did indeed narrowly avoid tripping over the high threshold. "Why is this threshold so tall? It's not like this is a temple," he grumbled. "This isn't a temple, but it's still the kind of place that requires a high threshold," Wei Wuxian said. They lit 5 or 6 sets of fire seals in 2s and 3s. Flickering orange firelight illuminated the room. Rice straw was scattered over the floor. Some distance ahead, there was an offering table, below which a few wooden stools of varying heights had fallen. To their right, there was a small, dark room. Finally, there were 7 or 8 raven black coffins on display before them. "So this is a coffin home, where dead people are temporarily stored?" Jinling asked. "Unidentified corpses it would be inauspicious to keep at home, and corpses awaiting burial are all typically placed in these coffin homes. You could think of it as a relay station for dead people." The small room on the right was probably a resting room for the building's guard. "Senior Mo, why do the thresholds in coffin homes have to be so high?" Lan Wangji asked. "To stop any transformed corpses," Wei Wuxian replied. Can high thresholds stop corpse transformations? Lan Wangji said blankly. They can't stop the transformation, but they can sometimes stop low-level transformed corpses from leaving. He turned around and stood in front of the threshold. Suppose I'm dead, and I've just transformed. The youths nodded vigorously. If it hasn't been too long, he continued, won't my limbs be stiff? Won't my range of motion be limited? Aren't you wasting your breath? Jinling said. You won't even be able to walk since you can't lift your leg. You can only jump. At this point, he came to a sudden realization. Correct, Wei Ying said. I can only jump. He locked his legs together and jumped at the exit. But because the threshold was too high, he was unable to jump over it. Regardless of how many times he tried, his toes always crashed into the wooden block. The disciples found this very funny and imagined a newly turned corpse trying its best to jump outside in the same fashion, only to be blocked by the threshold. They began laughing. You see, Wei Ying said. Don't laugh. This is an example of the cleverness of common people. Sure, it's crude and looks trivial, but it is indeed effective at defending against low-level corpses. If the corpse trips over the threshold and falls to the floor, it won't be able to crawl back up for a while because its limbs are still stiff. By the time it can get up, either the sun is about to rise and the rooster is about to start crowing, or the coffin house guard has discovered it. The fact that ordinary people without any background and cultivation thought of a method like this is pretty amazing. Jinling had also laughed, but his face immediately straightened. Why did she bring us to a coffin home? Will this place somehow keep the walking corpses from surrounding us? And where did she run off to? I'm afraid it does actually stop them from surrounding us, Wei Ying replied. We've already stood here for so long, but have any of you heard any walking corpses? Just as he finished speaking, the ghost of the young woman suddenly appeared atop one of the coffins. Under Wei Ying's guidance, the youths had already carefully observed the ghost's appearance, including the streaks of blood running from her eyes and her tongueless mouth. Thus, no one really felt nervous or scared upon seeing her this time. It was clear that, just as Wei Ying had said, their courage had indeed grown after they had experienced a few frights, and they could now calmly face her. That girl had no physical body, only her soul, which emitted a faint light. She was petite and her face was small. If she were cleaned up a bit, she would clearly turn out to be a pitiable girl-next-door type. However, her spread-legged sitting position made clear that she wasn't the least bit graceful. The bamboo pole that served as her eyes leaned against the coffin, and her thin calves dangled off the side, swinging back and forth anxiously. As she sat atop the coffin, she lightly patted the lid with her hand. Once she was done, she hopped off and circled around it, gesticulating at them. This time, her gestures were very easy to understand. She was miming opening the coffin. She wants us to help her open it, Jinling asked. Could her body be inside? Maybe she wants us to help bury her and bring her peace, Lan Wangji suggested. This was a reasonable conjecture. Many ghosts were unable to find peace because their bodies never received a burial. Wei Ying stood on one side of the coffin, and several youths stood on the other, intending to assist him. I don't need your help. You all should stand back a bit just in case there isn't a body inside, but something that will spray poison at you or something like that. He opened the coffin by himself and placed the lid on the ground. Looking down, he saw a corpse. However, the corpse did not belong to the ghost girl, but to someone else. A young man. Someone had arranged the man's body into a peaceful resting position. Pressed beneath his folded hands was a horsetail whisk, and he wore a pure white, was wide, and his lips were pale. However, the upper half of his face was wrapped layer by layer in a bandage 4 fingers wide. The part of the bandage which should have covered his eyes did not protrude, but sunk instead. There were no eyes there at all, only 2 empty pits. Hearing that they had opened the coffin, the girl fumbled her way closer. She reached into the coffin and began groping about. Once her hand met the corpse's face, she stamped her feet, and a pair of bloody tears trickled from her blinded eyes. There was no need for words or gestures. Everyone understood. The corpse inside this lonely coffin and this lonely coffin home belonged to the real Xiao Xing. Ghosts' tears could not fall from their faces. The girl cried silently for a period before suddenly gnashing her teeth and rising. She said to them, anxious and angry, looking as though she were desperate to spill everything on her mind. "Do we need soul inquiry again?" Lan Wangji said. "There's no need," Wei Ying replied. "We won't necessarily ask her the questions she wants to be asked. Plus, I think her answers will be very complex and difficult to translate." Though he did not say, "I'm afraid you won't be up to the task," Lan Wangji still felt a bit ashamed. Silently, he came to a decision. After our return, I have to practice soul inquiry more diligently. I have to be able to play it like Wangji, as fluidly, as rapidly, as accurately. "Then what should we do?" Lan Wangji said. "How about empathy then?" Wei Ying said. Each major clan had their own specialized method of gathering information from resentful spirits. Empathy was Wei Ying's specialty. This method was not as deep and complex as other families' methods. Anyone could use it. All he had to do was invite the resentful spirit into him. Using his body as the medium, he could then invade the dead's soul and memory, seeing what they had seen, hearing what they had heard, and feeling what they had felt. If the dead's feelings were particularly intense, then he would feel their sorrow, their fury, their ecstasy, and other such emotions even more strongly. Hence the name, empathy. This method could be considered the simplest, quickest, most direct, and most effective of all methods of gaining information from the dead. Of course, even more than that, it was the most dangerous. All feared and avoided the prospect of being possessed by a resentful spirit. Empathy was like playing with fire. One slip of attention, and you would soon be forced to taste the bitter fruit of your mistake. If the spirit, taken advantage of your error, broke the mutual understanding and attacked, even the lightest consequence involved being robbed of your body. "That's too dangerous," Jinling protested. "That kind of evil technique, not one—" Wei Ying interrupted him. "All right, there's no more time to waste. How about everyone stand up properly? Quickly. Once we're done, we still have to go back and find Lan Wangji. Jinling, you'll be the overseer." The overseer was an indispensable part of the empathy ritual. They prevented the empathy user from becoming trapped in the resentful spirit's mind, unable to free themselves. The overseer and the empathy user had to decide on a secret signal beforehand, ideally a phrase or sound very familiar to the empathy user. They were then required to supervise the entirety of the proceedings. If at any point the overseer sensed that something was amiss, they would immediately take action to pull the empathy user out. Jinling pointed to himself. "Me? You're asking me to supervise you while you do something like this? If young Master Jin does not want to do it, how about I help?" Lan Wangji said. "Jinling, Did you bring the Jiang clan's silver bell? Wei Wuxian said. Silver bells were one of the signature accessories of the Yunmeng Jiang clan. Jinling had been raised by both clans since he was small. He would live at the Lan Lingjin clan's Jinlin terrace for a while, then live at the Yunmeng Jiang clan's lotus pier. Thus, he should have been carrying objects from both clans. As expected, he pulled out a small, simple bell, wearing a complicated expression. Carved into the silver was the Jiang clan emblem, the 9-petal lotus. Wei Wuxian stared at the bell for a moment. Noticing a trace of something strange in his eyes, Jinling said, "What's wrong?" "It's nothing," Wei Wuxian replied. He took the bell and handed it to Lan Wangji. The Jiang clan's bells have a calming, centering effect. This will be our signal. Jinling stuck out his hand and snatched back the bell. "I'll do it." Lan Jingyi humphed. "One moment you're unwilling, the next you want to do it again. Suddenly the day's bright, suddenly it's overcast. What a princess-like attitude." "Why don't you come in?" Wei Wuxian said to the ghost girl. She wiped her eyes and face and ran at him, her entire soul merging with his body. Wei Wuxian lowered himself slowly against the coffin. The youths rushed to drag over a pile of rice straw for him to sit on, while Jinling clutched the bell tightly, his thoughts unreadable. Just as the girl had crashed into Wei Wuxian, a problem suddenly occurred to him. If this girl is blind, then when I empathize with her, won't I be blind and unable to see anything too? That would really reduce the effectiveness of all this. Oh well, as long as I can hear, I'll make do. After the heavens and the earth stopped spinning, his originally feather-light soul seemed to land on firm ground. As the girl opened her eyes, Wei Wuxian opened his eyes with her. To his surprise, before him was not a field of black, but a bright, crisp landscape of green hills and clear waters. He could see, after all. It was likely that, at the time of this memory, the girl had not yet gone blind. During empathy, the memories which appeared before him would be her most intense memories, the memories she most wanted to share. He simply had to watch calmly and experience what she experienced. Presently, they shared the same senses. The girl's eyes were his eyes, her mouth was his mouth. The girl sat by a small creek, facing the water and grooming herself. Though her clothes were tattered, she still wanted a basic degree of cleanliness. She tapped her foot rhythmically, humming a little tune as she rolled up her hair, but no matter how she arranged it, she seemed dissatisfied. Wei Wuxian felt a slim, wooden hairpin poking around in her hair. Suddenly, she lowered her head and examined her reflection in the water. Wei Wuxian's gaze followed hers. The water showed a girl with a pointed chin and a face shaped like a watermelon seed. The girl's eyes were empty of pupils. They were entirely white. She clearly looks blind, but right now, can't I see? Wei Wuxian thought. The girl finished putting up her hair, dusted her bottom, and jumped up. She picked up the bamboo pole lying by her feet and began skipping along the road. As she walked, she swung the pole, swiping at the leaves and branches above her head, poking at the stones next to her feet, and frightening the grasshoppers hiding in the grass. She continued like this for a period of time, until, far up ahead, people approached. Immediately, she stopped skipping and held the bamboo pole properly, knocking it against the ground as she inched forward, appearing very cautious. The people who approached turned out to be a few village women, who, upon seeing her condition, stepped aside and let her pass, while whispering in each other's ears. The girl nodded to them hastily. Thank you. One of the village women seemed to take pity on her. She lifted the white cloth covering her basket, took out a piping hot bun, ma'am. It turned out that the girl was named Jing. Once she took her leave of the village women, Jing gobbled up the bun in 2 or 3 bites. Then she started skipping again, flying what felt like a meter up with every step. Inside her body, Wei Wuxian skipped with her until he felt dizzy and stars were dancing in his eyes. This girl really knows how to act wild. I understand now. She's pretending to be blind. She was probably born with white pupils. Even though she looks blind on the surface, she actually can't see. She's using her appearance to pose as a blind person in order to trick people and win their sympathy. As a young, lone, homeless girl, if she pretended to be blind, others would naturally lower their guard. In reality, she could see perfectly clearly and could thus adapt to the situation. It indeed counted as a smart method of self-protection. However, Jing's soul was truly blind, which meant that she had gone blind while alive. So how had she transformed from a fake blind girl into a real one? Could she have seen something she wasn't supposed to see? Jing continued skipping all the way down the road, as long as no one was around. When people neared, she played a shrinking, cowering blind girl. Continuing on in stops and starts, she eventually arrived at a small town. In places that bustled with people, she naturally had to perform to the best of her abilities. She tapped her bamboo pole to and fro, behaving as naturally as wind-blowing waves upon the water. Slowly, she shuffled along with the flow of the crowd until she suddenly collided head-on with a middle-aged man dressed head to toe in finery. Appearing very alarmed and frightened, she said repeatedly, I'm sorry, I can't see, I'm sorry." Since when couldn't she see? She had run straight toward him. The man she collided with whirled around in fury, as though he was about to break into a round of abuse. But upon seeing that she was blind, and on top of that fairly pretty, he realized that if he slapped her in the face in the middle of the street, people were sure to condemn him. He could only say a few angry words. "Be careful about where you're going." Jing apologized repeatedly, but as the man was about to leave, he realized he wasn't willing to let it go just yet. His unruly right hand found Jing's bottom and pinched her forcefully. As he shared her feelings, this was effectively the same as pinching Wei Wuxian. He instantaneously felt his skin crawl and become covered in a dense layer of goosebumps. He could think about nothing except slapping the man so hard he'd fly right into the earth. Jing shrank into a ball and stopped moving, appearing very afraid. But once the man had walked far away, she felt her way into a hidden alley. She spat immediately. She pulled out the wallet she had hidden against her chest, turning it over and dumping out the money. Once she counted them, she let out another. What a jackass. They're all like this. He dresses like he's some big shot, but he barely had any cash on him. If you grabbed them and shook them down, you wouldn't hear a single coin jangle. Wei Wuxian wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Jing was only a teenager, probably not even 15 at the time, but she could curse at someone with remarkable fluidity. She could snatch their purses even more deftly. If you pickpocketed me, you definitely wouldn't be cursing about me like this. Back that day, I had a lot of money. He was still in the middle of sighing in self-pity, wondering when he had become so broke, when Jing found her next target. Pretending to be blind again, she left the alley and walked for a bit, then repeated her old trick. She let out an "Aya!" as she ran into a white-robed Taoist. I'm sorry, I can't see, I'm sorry," she said again. Internally, Wei Wuxian shook his head. The pretty little girl didn't even change her lines. The Taoist she had run into swayed, then turned, first steadied her before replying. "I'm fine. Miss, you can't see either?" This person was very young. His robes were simple and clean, and a sword wrapped in white cloth was tied to his back. The lower half of his face was very beautiful and fresh, though a little too thin, but the upper half of his face was wrapped in a bandage 4 fingers wide, through which the faint tinge of blood could be seen. You have reached the end of the video.